Many shared memories today at home and abroad of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. In other news, another threat to America's school children. This time it is in the air. And a warning today about pacemakers and other medical implants, if the lawsuits don't stop.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. A model of courage, a treasure, the promise of a generation. Those are some of the reactions of people from every walk of life today to the death of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. She was 64 when she died last night at her apartment in New York City. She died of cancer, as you probably know, which had spread quickly. She was remembered today with flowers and tears and happy recollections. Here's ABC's Bob Jamieson.
Hundreds of people gathered in a light rain outside her apartment, paying silent respect to Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. Dozens laid flowers at the door of the building to which her family and friends returned today. Senator Edward Kennedy issued a statement saying, "She will never really leave us." Her longtime companion, Maurice Templesman, and her daughter Caroline remained silent. For the family, John F. Kennedy Jr. expressed gratitude for the outpouring of sympathy and spoke of his mother's death.
Last night at around 10:15, my mother passed on. She was surrounded by her friends and her family and her books and the people and the things that she loved, and she did it in her own way and on her own terms, and we all feel lucky for that. And now she's in God's hands.
In a White House garden she had planted as First Lady, President and Mrs. Clinton spoke of her family as well as her legacy.
We hope that Mrs. Onassis' children, John and Caroline, and her grandchildren find solace in the extraordinary contribution she made to our country.
She will always be more than a great First Lady. She was a great woman and a great friend, and all of us will miss her very much.
As John Kennedy was escorted through a crush of photographers to join other family members making arrangements for the funeral, he asked that they now be given the privacy his mother so cherished. In that hope, visitation services for friends and family will be held in Mrs. Onassis' apartment. A funeral mass will be said Monday at a Catholic church near her apartment. It is expected to be private. Bob Jamieson, ABC News, New York.
There was a lot of reaction today from former President Carter. She showed us how one could approach tragedy with courage. From her fashion designer, she helped to make so famous Oleg Cassini. She created fashion because she was who she was. And this from a woman in the street outside Mrs. Onassis' apartment today. I think she meant a lot to the country, and I just felt I had to walk down and be here for a while. The sense of loss has been international. ABC's Richard Gisbert on the reaction in Europe.
The death of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis made headlines across Europe, but especially in France, where the story took up half the day's newscast.
Madame Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis.
As President Kennedy's wife, the reporter said, she symbolized happiness in America, then distress. Perhaps it was her French roots, the fact that she spoke the language. Perhaps it was her style. But in 1961, Paris was enthralled by the First Lady, and the most powerful man in the free world was powerless to compete with her.
I am the man who accompanied Jacqueline Kennedy to Paris, and I've enjoyed it.
Her 1968 marriage to Aristotle Onassis made Europe her temporary home. When she accompanied Onassis to a Belfast shipyard, the Irish crowds behaved as though they had been graced by royalty. And even though she had long since returned to America, Europeans remembered Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis.
She was a glamorous lady, that's right. Elegant. Elegant. The equivalent to royalty in America.
Definitely. She brought the White House to life. She's had an amazing life, and I think she was a great ambassador to the United States. I think she'll be really missed.
Initially, Europe was captivated by the unprecedented elegance Jacqueline Kennedy brought to world politics. Then it felt for the widow, the model of grace and courage. Now Europe will remember the legend. Richard Gisbert, ABC News, London.
Later in the broadcast, why Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis made such an enduring impression on so many people. And in the other news, the legal threat that could mean life or death to Americans who rely on heart pacemakers. And why some American school children may be getting sick, simply from breathing.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Brought to you by Cotton Incorporated.
On Capitol Hill today, a warning about the high cost of medical lawsuits, the practical effects, which could have an impact on nearly 7.5 million Americans who rely on medical devices to stay alive. Here's ABC's Bob Zelnick.
Most pacemakers, heart valves, and other implants include materials like silicone, Teflon, and Dacron. Now, companies including Dow Chemical and DuPont, which manufacture these materials, say they will no longer sell them to implant manufacturers. The reason? Patients who have had bad experiences with the implants have been suing not only the implant makers, but also the raw material suppliers. The chemical companies are winning nearly every case, but in one series of cases, DuPont spent $8 million defending suits on devices for which it had furnished only $1,300 worth of material. Today, they told a Senate subcommittee that was not economical.
The cost of defending these cases successfully is very expensive. It's very enormous.
The problem is that if all implants disappeared, the heart fibrillator implanted in Peggy Phillips, who has twice suffered near-fatal attacks, could not be replaced.
I think it would be similar to being in prison the rest of my life. And, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if I could handle that.
This is a public health time bomb, and it is ticking, and the lives of real people are going to be lost if it explodes.
Lawmakers are considering a bill which would restrict the legal liability of suppliers. Consumer groups, which usually oppose that approach, now may have no other choice. Bob Zelnick, ABC News, Capitol Hill.
President Clinton's plan for health care reform continues to work its way slowly through Congress. The president's Democratic allies there point out that his plan will guarantee universal coverage. But as ABC's John Cochran reports, the Republicans want something they argue is less expensive. And they're paying big money to sell their low-cost ideas.
We're ready for prime time.
And to get on prime time, Republicans are paying $500,000 for TV ads aimed at showing that Democrats aren't the only ones who want health care reform.
My diabetes. I'm locked into my old job.
Yes, we can make health insurance portable now, without the Clinton government-run health care system.
But the ads key on only that one issue.
Because it's the most important issue for the people who do the work and pay the taxes and pull the wagon in the country, and that's the ability to change jobs or lose their job without losing their health insurance.
Under Senator Graham's plan, most workers who lose their jobs would have to pay for insurance. The poorest would get some government help. Moderate Republicans like Senator John Chafee want much more sweeping reforms. ABC News learned Chafee refused to attend today's news conference because he wants universal coverage. Republicans who were there tried to shift talk of their disunity to the problems Democrats have with Dan Rostenkowski. Rostenkowski's lawyers are trying to plea bargain expected charges of misusing public funds. In a letter to Attorney General Janet Reno, Republican Congressman Christopher Shays warned that Rostenkowski should not be allowed to cut a deal because of the perception that he is needed to guide the debate on health care. Republicans say if Rostenkowski has to resign as chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, Democrats will find it much harder to pass health reform.
I don't know what Ways and Means is going to look like after Memorial Day. I don't know that the Democrats are going to have a stable majority there.
Democrats say they need Rostenkowski's leadership, but they worry that the public will think it smells a rat if he successfully plea bargains and keeps his job. John Cochran, ABC News, Capitol Hill.
On Wall Street today, the Dow Jones Industrial Average rose about 7 points to close at 3766. The trading was moderate. For the week, the Dow Industrials gained 106 points. Back in just a moment. One of the country's most exciting football players until recently, Mark Duper, has been arrested and faces federal drug trafficking charges. Last year, Duper was unable to find a job in the NFL. There may be a connection. A report from Miami, ABC's Mark Potter.
For 12 years, Mark Duper was a star wide receiver for the Miami Dolphins and was known as Super Duper. He played 3 times in the Pro Bowl until the Dolphins released him last year. Today, Duper was released on bond from a federal court in Fort Lauderdale after being arrested for allegedly buying more than 2 pounds of cocaine from undercover agents who secretly tape recorded the negotiations for the $18,000 sale. The DEA believes Duper planned to ship the cocaine to his hometown in Louisiana, where it would be converted into crack cocaine for sale on the streets.
Throughout the negotiations, there was a clear understanding that he intended to transport
this cocaine to Shreveport. He even discussed methods of transportation, which was to rent a car, tape it to the bottom of the car, take it to Shreveport, Louisiana, and sell it.
According to the DEA, Duper told an undercover informant he was having financial troubles and wanted to buy and sell cocaine in order to make a lot of money quickly. Drug agents now are trying to identify others he may have been working with. Mark Potter, ABC News, Miami.
Haiti is about to get hit with what the U.S. acknowledges is a very blunt instrument. At midnight tomorrow, an international embargo against Haiti is going to take effect. The only products allowed in will be food and medicine. It's designed to force the military leaders there to step aside. Here's ABC's Linda Patillo.
These are the men the embargo is supposed to force from power. General Raul Cedras, the 44-year-old Army commander and leader of the coup that deposed Jean-Bertrand Aristide, General Philippe Biambi, the Army Chief of Staff, and Colonel Michel Francois, the Port-au-Prince police chief who works so deeply in the shadows, only one photograph of him is known to exist. None of the three has said he will step down, and few here believe the tighter sanctions that begin tomorrow night will change that. Neither the military or their elite backers are expected to run short of cash. Colonel Francois now controls everything from the port to the national telephone and electricity companies.
Even the amount of assets that have been accumulated both here and abroad, even if you leave off the interest of those, then you can wait and ride out 2 or 3 years.
Even some U.S. diplomats have their doubts. A high-placed embassy official here told ABC News today the tighter sanctions will have minimal effect on the Haitian military. What the embargo will do is shut down the last 40 factories still operating here because all commerce with Haiti will be banned. Today was the last day of work for the 430 Haitians at this textile plant. There will be thousands more like them, casualties of tomorrow's tighter sanctions. The question is whether those sanctions will have any effect on the people in charge here. Linda Patillo, ABC News, Port-au-Prince.
In the Middle East today, the new Palestinian police force has its first major security challenge. 2 Israeli soldiers were shot to death in their car by Palestinian militants along the now border between Israel and the Gaza Strip, and the killers fled into Gaza. The Palestinian police force, they're the ones in blue, and the Israeli troops, who are in green, set up checkpoints at the border, but it is the PLO's job to find the killers. In our next segment, schoolroom air. It could be enough to make you sick. It is going to be an important few days for the Korean Peninsula, unless international inspectors who are in North Korea now can observe precisely what the North Koreans are doing at their nuclear power plant. The outside world may never be sure whether the country is accumulating enough plutonium to fuel a nuclear weapon. ABC's John McCarthy on where things stand right now.
The bad news is that North Korea is pulling fuel rods from its nuclear plant in what is being called a serious violation of international rules. The good news, and this is what the Clinton administration chose to stress today, is that the fuel rods are sitting in a nearby holding pond and have not as yet been diverted to make nuclear bombs. Inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Agency, or IAEA, have seen the fuel rods.
The IAEA, in fact, has told us that it is confident that there is no diversion of the fuel that has just been discharged.
Do you find that to be a hopeful sign?
Yes.
The nuclear plant in question, shown in this enhanced satellite picture, is in the same complex as a fuel reprocessing facility where North Korea is believed to have taken fuel rods 5 years ago and extracted enough plutonium to make 1 or 2 bombs. The U.S. does not want that to happen again. President Clinton's national security advisors gathered at the White House to assess the next move. One new signal came from North Korea's ambassador to China, who held a press conference in Beijing. He said his government would allow for full inspections if the U.S. would open a third round of talks on developing economic and political ties. The U.S. appears to be interested.
If the issue of the discharge of the fuel can be dealt with, then I see no reason why we could not proceed to a third round.
American officials say they are detecting a small change in attitude by North Korea. It may not continue, but if there is any softening at all, the Clinton administration wants to find a way to encourage it. John McWethy, ABC News, the Pentagon.
Elsewhere in the country today, officials in the Chicago area are looking into a new and totally unexpected problem with the public schools. Not the textbooks, not drugs or violence this time. It is the very air the students breathe. Here's ABC's Aaron Hayes.
Matt Miazga's doctor thinks bad air at his school may be what's making him ill. Matt came down with fibromyalgia, or pain in the muscles, around the same time his fellow students and teachers at Plum Grove Junior High started complaining about the school's air making them sick.
The range of symptoms stretches from respiratory complaints such as runny nose, itchy eyes, hay fever type of symptoms, to dizziness, fibromyalgia, or severe muscle pains.
All consistent, he says, with breathing polluted indoor air. The school has ventilation problems. Testing of the air quality started this week. Plum Grove is not alone. Schools hurting for money have been skimping on maintenance, sealing up their buildings to save energy and cutting back the fresh air supply. The Environmental Protection Agency found in one study every school tested had indoor air problems, meaning many students were stuck in stuffy classrooms, often exposed to high levels of dust, mold, and chemicals from cleaning solutions and pesticides.
We believe that definitely we need to do something about indoor air quality in schools, given the fact of the poor ventilation that is maintained in schools.
The EPA just put out a draft report advising schools to start checking their indoor air. One of the big worries? The American Lung Association says the childhood asthma rate has soared in the last decade, up 56% for all children, up 145% for children ages 10 to 14.
I do think that asthma and respiratory illnesses have increased because of the dust and the molds and the chemicals that are in schools.
Okay, let me mark this down. Sometimes the solutions are relatively simple. At the Hinsdale Middle School, kids were getting dizzy during class last year. Huge new air ducts were put in, and now fresh air pours into the classrooms and students are breathing easier. It's what environmental officials want to see happen in the thousands of classrooms believed to be affected by polluted indoor air. If the problem does not get fixed, government may move toward regulating the air America's students breathe. Aaron Hayes, ABC News, Chicago.
Finally from us this evening, the fairly obvious choice for a person of the week. We've been struck by how much sadness has been generated in the last day by the passing of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. On the other hand, not surprising, she helped to define a generation. There are several reasons why the images of Jacqueline Kennedy from the 60s and the reality of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis from the 80s and early 90s will endure. She has meant something to the nation as an example.
They moved the glamour capital of America from Hollywood to Washington.
But there was more to Mrs. Kennedy's example than glamour, though for that brief 1,000 days in the White House, she was the absolute epitome of glamour. She was also a young mother who imparted to the rest of us that if you didn't succeed bringing up the children, none of the rest of it would matter very much.
As a mother, she was selflessly devoted to her children and never wavered in the value she placed on being a mother and more recently a grandmother.
And for all that talk about being the American royalty, she was a devotee of inclusiveness long before it was ever politically correct.
She was the first lady to hire a mentally retarded employee here at the White House. And she made certain for the first time that minority children were all welcomed in the White House nursery.
When she invited CBS to take a tour of the White House, that's the late Charles Collingwood, the correspondent beside her, it was so Americans could share in their own history. The audience was huge.
This piano was designed by Franklin Roosevelt with the eagle support. And this is the end of the room where Pablo Casals played for us.
It was Jacqueline Kennedy who opened the president's house to the best and the brightest of American culture. Whatever she did, whatever she wore, millions of women wished to emulate.
It changed the entire way my mother dressed. I remember my mother's boucle suit and her pillbox hat, and I remember that my mother didn't wear the suit after 1963.
That is, after November 22nd, 1963, the day that President Kennedy was murdered. The Texas governor, John Connally, also in the car that day, was wounded. His wife was with him.
The first thing she said was, "Jack, what have they done to you?" And that broke my heart. I knew what they had done to him by then. My heart broke for her because I knew there was no going back for her. The children and I did have 30 more years with John Connally. She and her children did not have that 30 years.
Some things about Jacqueline Kennedy have been frozen in the mind for 30 years. It was she who decided that the president's funeral would be all that it was, and it was majestic. It was noble. At times, it almost broke the nation's heart. And through it all, as the French President Charles de Gaulle put it, she set an example to the world of how to behave. But when Jacqueline Kennedy decided a few years later she would not be the president's widow forever, much of the nation took it as a personal affront. It would take time to appreciate that here was an example of an independent woman, so valued in the 90s. When Aristotle Onassis died, his widow had all the money anyone would ever need, but she went to work anyway. She spent the last 15 years as an editor for Doubleday. She liked publishing, she said, because you promote the book and the author, not the editor. Because she was so private, much of her seems long ago and far away. Yet she made so many connections to America's heart. Later tonight on 2020, a rare opportunity to hear 4 of the nation's first ladies. Barbara Walters will talk with Betty Ford, Rosalind Carter, Nancy Reagan, and Hillary Clinton. All will share their recollections of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. That is our report on World News Tonight. I'm Peter Jennings. Good night.